Back in December 2024, I recommended a 15-part book series on this channel, and it was all designed around exploring your inner world from multiple angles to help see meaningful change. And I'm back with another smaller round of books that I think you'll love. And in that previous list, it had us moving toward a psychology of being, helping us move towards who we would like to become and giving us plans to be able to get there. So let's take this discussion further and go beyond. Let's instead look at the farther reaches of human nature. That's how we're going to start this list, so we're going to jump straight into it. So we've talked about Abraham Maslow on this channel before, and we've focused on his ideas of self-actualization. And that's what this book is all about, as well as taking it further and pushing towards self-transcendence. Now, I'm going to focus on self-actualization for this video, but there's also lots of calls in this and prompts for self-discovery as well, which could very, very easily be understood as shadow work within a Jungian sense, and specifically golden shadow work. So with all this in mind, let me give you a few highlights from this book that I have personally loved and why I think you will love it as well. And combined, they'll give us this lovely little 3-part system which we can start putting into practice. So I'm going to start with part 1, which is inner signals. Let me just double check if that turns up. Perfect. So we're going to start off with a quote on page 32. Now I'm going to paraphrase it on here, and then I'm going to put the full quote on the screen. So if you want to screenshot it, you can read the full thing yourself. So it's just this part here in yellow. So recovering the self must include the recovery of the ability to have and to cognize inner signals, to know what and whom what one likes and dislikes, what is enjoyable and what is not, and when to eat, to sleep, and to rest, and when not to. The experientially empty person, lacking these directives from within, these voices from the real self, must turn to outer cues for guidance. He guides himself by clocks, rules, calendars, schedules, and other people. So I'll put the full quote on the screen if you are interested in reading that. But I'm going to stop there because the wording itself is already clear. It's the experientially empty person, which is very, very strong wording. So it's a very blunt way of putting it, but it really calls out the issue. So for Maslow, to be a self-actualizing person, which is to be a fully healthy and mature human individual, we need to be motivated from within, not from the outside. So we need to be aware of our capacities and have first-person awareness of what it feels like to experience them. But it's not just that. It's also the experience of frustration of what it's like to not be able to use them as well. So imagine a child that is at school and is a naturally gifted runner, and he absolutely loves running as well. When he competes against other children, let's say in a 400-meter race, he beats the second place by well over 20 seconds. So no one else even comes close to him. He's not doing it as a show of power to defeat others. He just simply loves running, and because of the inner experience he gets from running. And in his case, naturally, that's going to mean that he just beats other people in those races. Now, his teachers aren't happy with him about this, telling him that it's okay to win, but he needs to slow down to make it more fair for the other children so that it doesn't upset them. And then this is where the big problem can happen. Not because there's anything wrong with what he's doing or with the school itself, but because there isn't a natural fit between his capacities and his capabilities and the environment itself. So either the environment inhibits his capabilities, or he'll have to self-censor and inhibit these capabilities himself. And this is the crucial point. It's that he can't rely on his inner sense of momentum and fulfillment and joy because it's not being well received by those around him. So his inner signals have to be ignored or inhibited in comparison to outer cues, if we go back to that other picture that we had before. So he learns over time that rules and schedules and other people's opinions are rewarded more than following his own inner cues. So he starts to look outwards and understand how he should act rather than looking inwards. Now, fans of Carl Jung can probably see a huge link here between persona development and the need for shadow work, and it definitely applies again here. And Maslow makes this point really, really clear just a few pages later on page 35. Again, just this little part in yellow. If you deliberately plan to be less than you are capable of being, then I warn you that you'll be deeply unhappy for the rest of your life. You will be evading your own capacities, your own possibilities. And this really grabbed me when I first read it. So before I say anything else on this, just take a second to think about what naturally comes up for you with this. So what comes to mind intuitively when you hear that quote? Were you deliberately planning or being less than you are capable of being? And how is that having an impact on you? And what's one small thing that you can actually do about it? So for me, this is where teaching online has started to come in. Now, I absolutely love teaching children and I would gladly do it for the rest of my life, but I'm naturally going to be limited about the topics that I can teach and the depths that I can teach at. And when I pay close attention to that small inner voice and that inner signal, it tells me that I know I can teach at a whole new level that just isn't possible in a school environment. Now, I don't know where this journey goes or what the farther reaches of what my teaching looks like, but what I do know is that I absolutely love the process and I feel genuinely, truly and completely alive when I'm teaching. So that's how I'm putting Maslow's work into practice. So just to be clear on this, just stop evading your own capacities because it's going to take you down a path of frustration. But if we're not sure about our own capacities and our own capabilities, then where do we actually begin? Well, this is where the idea of being values comes in. So that's the second part in here. So we've got inner signals and we've got being values as the second part of our trio. So I'm going to stick with this term of being values, but he also calls it being cognition or just simply be values, but they all refer to the same thing. And it refers to the values that self-actualizing people hold to help them to have this healthy and appropriate attitude towards life and towards existence more widely. Now, page 121 onwards, starting with this chapter, Notes on Being Psychology, that goes through a very thorough breakdown on what it means to live according to these values. So you can check to see how close you are living in accordance with them. And I'm definitely going to do a deep dive on this chapter at some point. But what might be more relevant here are the 14 values that he specifically mentions that are enjoyed by these people who go through these peak experiences. So effectively, what these are is they make up a flourishing and a healthy and a fully human individual. So if you're looking to explore a new way of being and begin practicing some new values, you might want to try some of these. So just very, very briefly, just to go over again, all these ones that I've just highlighted in yellow. We've got truth, goodness, beauty, wholeness, which he then separates into as well dichotomy transcendence, which basically just means acceptance or reconciling opposites. There's also aliveness and uniqueness and perfection, which he goes a little bit further and clarifies with necessity. So again, by these two, he means that everything's in its right place and that nothing needs to be added or taken away from the experience. It's perfect and necessary in and of itself. Then there's also completion and justice and order and simplicity and richness and effortlessness and playfulness and self-sufficiency. Now, this is a hugely practical list. So let's say you are looking to change your career. You can use this list to point yourself in the right direction and then rank each of these according to your ideal vision. So let's say maybe you are frustrated at work, but you don't know exactly why. So you might be pleased with the goodness of the work that you're doing and that it's having a positive impact in the world and the self-sufficiency that you have and the effortlessness that you're able to complete it in, but that you feel guilty complaining about it when you know others are struggling to find meaningful careers. Well, instead of staying in this frustrated zone, you might scan over this list and realize actually the work that you were doing could be done in a simpler way, which would make it more effective. So essentially what you've done is you've worked out a better future for you, specifically how it could be better and how that would shift you at an identity level. And then you can go about improving your work situation without having to compare yourself to others. So rather than complaining and living in deficiency cognition, which is another term that Maslow uses for a bit more of a survival-based issue, we can take a more proactive approach and improve the agency in our own lives. So if we link back to that first point, we receive the inner signal and we pay attention to where it is calling us towards. What type of person we know we could become if we healthily expressed in all their fullness those capacities and those capabilities that we love to use. So we pay attention to those inner signals and we see what type of ideal future that they are trying to prompt us to move towards, and then we take those little steps to move towards it. So there's a lot you can do with this list of being values, and that's just one practical way that I personally use it. In fact, even just as I'm talking about this now, I've realized that I definitely need to do a longer deep dive on this topic just to do it justice. So I'm going to make a little note of that. And if you wanted to make this practical for you right now, you could think about it as how can you maximize the delights of growth and minimize the anxieties of safety so that you can tilt towards moving in the right direction. And closely related to all this is our third and our final point, which is the last chapter of the book, and it is on Metamotivation. So again, I will write it out on here because this completes the little Venn diagram. So this is just a fancy word, which means what are the motivations of those people who are self-actualizing or living in line with those being values. So he breaks down a full list and he presents them as testable propositions. So don't just accept them at face value, test them out and see how you feel when you do them. Again, paying attention to these inner signals. Now, I'm going to give you a few that I'm a big fan of, and then we'll break them down as well. So proposition 3, let me just load it up on here so you can read through it at the same time. Because like I say, it's a very, very thorough chapter, this one. So for proposition 3, in the ideal instance, inner requiredness coincides with external requiredness. I want to with I must. So in everyday language, this is realizing your mission or your vocation or your wider purpose and putting it into action. It's not just beneficial for you and for those around you, but you actively want to be spending your time doing it because it's so fulfilling. And we've covered this idea in another lesson when I broke down this diagram of the overflowing pot. So if you've seen that video, that's how it would fit in here. So there's this inner calling that goes beyond just wanting to do something and into the mindset where you can't imagine your life without this. It's like telling an artist that you can have all the money in the world on the condition that you're not allowed to be creative for the rest of your life. It doesn't matter what the temptation is. This inner soul-based calling is pointing at something far more than money. It's far deeper and it's far higher. In the healthiest sense, it's a compulsion. So it's that I have to do this. It's what I was meant for. That's the energy behind this. And I also like proposition 11. So again, I will get this on the screen so that you can actually read through it at your own pace as well. So proposition 11, the full definition of the person or of human nature must then include intrinsic values as part of human nature. So by this, it means you need to take into account all aspects of a person, not just the ones that he prefers people to focus on. So it's his attitude and his temperament, his anatomy, his physiology, his neurology, his capacities, his values, how in line he is with the being values and so on. All of those are examples from proposition 11. So to take into account a person, it's not just what the person is like physically or mentally or emotionally or spiritually, it's all of them combined together, as well as what motivates them when they're at their best and their most flourishing. So if you're wondering what to do with your future or you're facing a difficult decision, it's worth considering yourself in your best moments and how that he would act, and then reverse engineer the plan from there. Essentially, in your peak experiences and best moments, how do you see the world and how do you act? And then when you work out all the factors that allow you to be this type of person more often, basically reverse engineering that. So over time, you naturally become the person that you want to become without extra effort or willpower. So I'm going to end all of this with one more, and it's going to be proposition 16. So it's going to start down here and end up here. It's a bit of a wordy one, this one, so I'll break it down again. The meta needs are equally potent amongst themselves on average, i.e., I cannot detect a generalized hierarchy of prepotency, but in any given individual, they may be and often are hierarchically arranged according to idiosyncratic talents and constitutional differences. Very, very wordy way of saying this. But what he means here is, in other words, that list of 14 values that I mentioned before, no one of them is better or worse than another. They're all equal. So just start practicing one and you'll naturally find it's easier to start practicing another, and then some good momentum will start to develop. He does mention that they will have different levels of importance for each individual. So that means that just because I prefer one over the other doesn't mean that you have to. We can both be effective because there isn't a right versus wrong. We can all find our own unique and individual meaning paths towards self-actualization without needing to compare ourselves to others. And that's why I love this book. So not only is it written really, really beautifully, but it's also a really great study of humanity at its best and then made practical for each individual person. So it encourages you to explore life and to put yourself in this curious, open-minded and exploratory mindset to see what works for you. Not just a theoretical human. You, to make it super, super specific. So going back to that little diagram just to finish all of this. So just consider how you are interpreting your inner signals, how in line you are with those being values, and also what is motivating for you in your best moments. And a meaningful life naturally follows on from this. That's going to be that center point of those three. I've got quite excited on talking about this book. So I want to go into this in a much, much deeper way in future lessons. So that's exactly what I'll do. If you like these ideas, I think you'll love this as well. It's The Farther Reaches of Human Nature by Abraham Maslow. And I will see you in a future lesson.